The small bakery smelled like vanilla, sugar, and quiet heartbreak, the kind that hides behind smiles. Evening sunlight spilled through the window, turning the air into gold dust as the camera of life lingered on untouched cakes. But no one there knew whose heart that scent belonged to, not yet. A woman stood near the counter, her shoulders slightly slumped, her voice careful, almost afraid to disturb the peace. "I'm sorry. I need to cancel the order," she whispered. The baker looked up, puzzled. "Cancel? But it's for your son's birthday tomorrow, right?" Her lips trembled into something that tried to be a smile. "Yes. But things changed." The words fell softly, but the silence that followed was heavier than the sound. She swallowed hard, her fingers gripping the counter just enough to stay composed. "Maybe another child will smile because of it." The baker hesitated. "Ma'am, it's already ready. I could refund." She shook her head gently. "No, please. Keep it. It's fine." Behind her stood a man who would unknowingly change her life before sunset. He was dressed in a dark charcoal suit, his presence quiet but magnetic, like someone who didn't belong to ordinary afternoons. His name was Adrian Cole. Billionaire. Visionary. Alone. He watched her reflection in the glass case, the reflection of a woman holding dignity like armor, even when it cracked at the edges. When she turned to leave, their eyes met, just for a heartbeat. Her gaze tired yet kind, his calm yet searching. She nodded faintly and walked out, the bell above the bakery door chiming once before the silence took over. Adrian hadn't realized it yet, but that silence had just asked him a question he couldn't ignore. Through the glass he saw her crossing the street, her coat too thin for the cold, like her life, stretched just enough to survive another day. A child's name echoed faintly in his mind as he turned back to the counter. "That woman," he said quietly. "What was her order?" The baker glanced at the slip beside the register. A birthday cake. Blue frosting. Tiny stars. For her son Ethan. Turning 8 tomorrow. Adrian read the handwriting on the slip. "Ethan, happy birthday, my little star." Something in those words pressed on an old wound he didn't know he still had. He stood there a moment longer, jaw tight, the way people look when memory and conscience collide. Finally, he reached for his card. Finish it. Exactly as she wanted. Add something extra. Make it special. "Sir," she canceled. "Then it's my order now," he said softly. That night, the city glittered beneath a quiet drizzle, like tears the sky didn't want anyone to see. A small delivery van stopped in front of a modest apartment. When Maya opened the door, confusion flickered across her tired face. There it was, a box wrapped in gold paper, tied with a ribbon that shimmered under the streetlight. Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope tucked beneath. No child should ever have to miss his birthday cake. From someone who believes in little stars. Her breath caught. Tears welled up and fell, one by one, onto the golden wrapping. Inside, her son gasped. "Mom, you said we couldn't have one." She knelt beside him, smiling through tears. "Looks like someone out there believes in us." Candles flickered. Laughter filled the small room like sunlight sneaking through a cracked door. And miles away, Adrian Cole stared at the city lights, unaware that this single act would soon demand something far greater from him. A week had passed since the cake. Yet for Maya, its warmth lingered like a quiet song she couldn't stop hearing. But songs fade, and bills don't. Every night, she watched Ethan sleep beside the cracked window of their apartment, the city lights flickering over his small face like dreams she couldn't afford. Rent was due again. Her shoes had lost their strength. But she still whispered, "We're okay," to the dark because mothers have to make lies sound like lullabies. She liked to think some acts of kindness were messages from life itself, proof that hope still answered, even when everything else stayed silent. Her coat clutched close against the wind, as if she could hold her life together the same way. That morning, she stopped at the community board outside the grocery store. Among ads for missing cats and part-time cleaning jobs, one line caught her eye. Cole Foundation, hiring administrative assistant. Cole. The name felt ordinary, but her pulse disagreed. She took a photo of the flyer, folded it carefully into her pocket, and smiled faintly. Persistence is all I have left, she whispered. Across town, in a tower of glass and silence, Adrian Cole stared out from his office window. The city was beautiful, but from this height, beauty looked lonely. He hadn't forgotten the woman in the bakery, or the way her voice cracked trying to stay strong. He had told himself it was just a moment of kindness. But some moments refused to leave quietly. That night, as the city lights flickered against the glass like restless stars, he opened his laptop. Her name wasn't there, no contact, no trace. Still, he found himself scrolling through the Cole Foundation's community projects, his thoughts wandering to things that had nothing to do with profit. Fate doesn't wait for permission to intervene. And somewhere in the city, life was already preparing its next move. Monday morning, Maya stood in the grand marble lobby of the Cole Foundation, where every step echoed, like it belonged to someone richer. She tightened her grip on the folder in her hand. Her resume was thin, but her hope wasn't. The receptionist smiled politely. "Mr. Cole will see you now." She didn't know she was walking straight into the past, and its quiet, waiting eyes. The door opened. Adrian Cole stood by the window, framed by the skyline, the morning light drawing a hard line across his face, half in shadow, half in thought. For a moment, neither spoke. The air itself seemed to hesitate. He turned slowly, brows furrowing as recognition flickered. "We've met before, haven't we?" Her fingers went still. The folder suddenly felt too light. "In a bakery," she said softly. "You paid for a stranger's mistake." He smiled faintly. "Not a mistake. A moment." For a second, silence stretched, not awkward but fragile, like glass holding something unseen. Then Ethan's name slipped out in conversation, and Adrian's eyes softened. "You're raising him alone?" She nodded. "Ethan's 8. Wants to be an astronaut. Loves stars." He smiled. "Stars are honest. They never promise more than they give." Something in her chest ached, not from sadness, but from being seen too clearly. For the first time in years, she felt safe standing in someone's gaze. When she left that afternoon, the cold bit at her face, but she barely felt it. She didn't know if she'd get the job. She only knew that a stranger had remembered, and sometimes that was enough to keep the world turning. And miles above the city, Adrian Cole stood by the same window, watching her cross the street. He didn't know why his chest felt heavier. Only that some stories don't end where they start. One written not by fate, but by a kindness that refused to stay small. Rain whispered against the city's glass that morning, soft, persistent, like a memory that wouldn't fade, or a promise that refused to. Maya stood in the narrow hallway outside Adrian Cole's office, hands brushing the worn folder she'd carried like a lifeline. She told herself she wasn't nervous. Liars always start with themselves. Across the city, another window waited for the same rain to mean something else. Adrian watched droplets slide down the glass wall of his office, blurring skyscrapers into moving shadows, as if the city itself were listening. He had met thousands of people, but some glances outlive introductions. "Send her in," he said. Maya entered quietly. Her coat was still damp, her hair pulled back in a modest knot. Yet, something about her felt unbroken, the kind of calm forged only by surviving storms. Adrian studied her for a moment, not like a CEO reading a resume, but like a man, searching for the truth inside ordinary words. "You're punctual," he said. She smiled faintly. "Old habit. When time isn't on your side, you learn to chase it." He leaned back, intrigued. Rain streaked down the window behind him, blurring the skyline into watercolor gray. "What made you apply here?" "The name," she said softly. "Cole Foundation." It felt safe. Safe. Safe is rare these days, she replied. "Especially for people without a safety net," he murmured. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was understanding. Two strangers, worlds apart, both recognizing the quiet hunger of survival. He nodded slowly. "You're hired." Silence. Even the rain outside seemed to stop for a second. Maya blinked. "Just like that." He smiled almost shyly. You've already proven your honesty once. That's rarer than any degree. Her lips parted, but no words came. Gratitude is heavier when it's real. Thank you, Mr. Cole. Adrian, he said. If we're going to build something meaningful, names shouldn't feel like walls. Days blurred into late evenings, screens dimming, coffee cooling, her resolve staying lit. Maya worked quietly, thoroughly, the rhythm of responsibility her only song. Adrian noticed. Not in words, but in glances, brief, unguarded moments that said more than formality ever could. One evening, he found her surrounded by files, papers fanned like wings of duty. You're still here? Hope doesn't organize itself, she said. He smiled. Neither does ambition. Why do you do this? She asked, her tone softer now. You have everything. He leaned against the desk, skyline fire reflecting off his watch, wealth glinting beside. Weariness. That's the problem, he said quietly. When you have everything, you start realizing how much of it doesn't matter. Neither of them slept easily that night. Kindness, when it lingers, keeps the mind awake. The next evening, as Maya left the building, she passed the framed quote near the exit. Be kind. You never know whose storm you're standing in. She whispered, smiling. Maybe kindness isn't random after all. Across town, under the same fading rain, Adrian stood on his penthouse balcony, the city shimmering below like a restless ocean of light. He thought of her, the calm in her voice, the strength behind her gentleness. It wasn't charity. It was restitution, for a kindness he hadn't known he needed. A scholarship appeared in her neighborhood the next week. A bakery donation under a forgotten name. Quiet gestures, invisible signatures of gratitude. And somewhere in that unseen space between hope and redemption, something quietly began to change direction. Morning sunlight slipped through half-drawn curtains, landing on a pile of unpaid bills and a chipped teacup. Maya stared at both. One reminded her of struggle, the other of hope gone cold. She sat quietly, tracing the rim of the cup, wondering if life would ever taste warm again. That's when she noticed it, an envelope at the edge of the table. No sender, just a single embossed C. Her fingers hovered above it. For a moment she almost tossed it aside. Another notice, another reminder of what she couldn't pay. But something about its weight made her stop. She tore it open, hands trembling. Inside was a scholarship letter, full tuition, supplies, and transport, with Ethan's name neatly typed at the top. Her breath hitched. The world went still. For 3 long seconds she didn't move. Then a laugh escaped her, cracked, trembling. Half prayer. Looks like someone up there still remembers us, she whispered. Across town, sunlight burned off the morning fog as Adrian Cole closed his laptop before the headline could finish loading. Cole Foundation announces community scholarships for underprivileged children. He wasn't smiling, exactly, more like exhaling the kind of breath you hold after years of pretending you're fine. Restitution tasted strange. Part peace, part punishment. He turned toward the window. The city stretched before him, glittering, indifferent, and unforgiving. He had funded hospitals, signed $1 million checks, built charities. But this one felt different. This one had a face, and a name he couldn't stop thinking about. That afternoon, the park was alive with color and sound. The air smelled of roasted peanuts and wet earth after drizzle. Ethan ran ahead, backpack bouncing, laughter spilling through the trees. The same boy, who once counted coins for bread, now racing with wind in his hair. Maya's heart ached in the sweetest way. She knelt to fix his badge, a tiny emblem of a better tomorrow. Promise me, she said, voice soft. No matter how big the world gets, you'll stay kind. He nodded, eyes wide and certain. Across the street, a black sedan idled by the curb. Through the tinted glass, Adrian watched her fix Ethan's collar, unaware that the man who once ruined lives with signatures now found salvation in small kindnesses. He didn't step out. Redemption, he decided, wasn't meant to be seen. He watched until Ethan waved at a balloon vendor, and Maya's laughter, light and unguarded, filled the air. Then he said quietly, "Drive." The car moved, but his thoughts stayed behind. That evening, as Maya returned home, She found another envelope slipped beneath the door. Plain white. No name. She opened it carefully. Inside was a short letter, typed on clean paper. For every storm you've walked through, there's a sunrise waiting. Keep believing in both. The page smelled faintly of rain and coffee, as if the writer had sealed it in the quiet hours of dawn. She pressed it to her chest, whispering to the silence, "Whoever you are, thank you for remembering us." High above the city, Adrian sat in his dim office, staring at the same words on the draft he'd never signed. He closed the document, leaned back, and let the darkness hold him. Kindness was supposed to heal others, not haunt you. But the more good he tried to do, the more he saw the hollow in his own reflection. Outside, the rain returned slow, deliberate, like forgiveness learning to fall again. Neither of them knew how soon their worlds would collide. Not in boardrooms or letters, but in a single moment that would test everything they'd begun to feel. The city slept under quiet drizzle, unaware that kindness was already rewriting its stories. Rain tapped against the tall glass walls of the lobby like impatient fingers. It was the kind of afternoon when the city felt slower, quieter. Yet inside the marble hall of the Orion Tower, the air was thick with tension. Clara stood near the elevator, clutching her umbrella, drops of rain sliding off its edge. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not like this. 2 hours earlier, she had been in her small kitchen, stirring soup for Eli, when her phone buzzed, a message from the catering company. Urgent meeting. Orion Tower. Bring your paperwork. Her stomach had tightened. She hadn't even had time to change her worn cardigan. But when survival calls, dignity waits. Now as the elevator doors slid open, she stepped inside and froze. Inside stood Damien Holt, the billionaire everyone talked about. The man who had unknowingly turned her son's birthday into a quiet heartbreak. His suit was flawless, his presence commanding. Yet when his eyes met hers, something flickered, a moment of startled recognition. Clara swallowed hard, gripping her umbrella tighter. The elevator doors closed with a soft chime, sealing them in a small space filled with silence and unspoken weight. The hum of machinery filled the gap where words should have been. Damien glanced sideways, pretending to check his watch. She stared at the numbers above the door. But both of them were thinking of the same scene. A child, a cancelled cake, a mother's quiet apology. At last Damien spoke. His voice was low, uncertain. "You work with the catering company?" Clara nodded. "Yes. I manage the orders sometimes." He hesitated, then said softly, "That day, at the bakery, you were the one with the boy." The elevator lights reflected in her eyes as she looked at him. Steady, composed, but not bitter. "Yes," she said. "That was my son." A pause. Then she added quietly, "He was really looking forward to that cake." Her words weren't sharp, just honest. And that honesty hit harder than blame. Damien's jaw tightened. The man who had built empires suddenly looked small, like a boy who had broken something precious without meaning to. "I didn't realize," he said. "I never do sometimes. The way small things matter." The elevator stopped on the 42nd floor. Neither moved. The door slid open, waited, then closed again when no one stepped out. Clara exhaled slowly. "Sometimes," she said, "small things are all we have." For a long moment, they stood in the hum of the ascending lift, two lives on opposite ends of the world, yet closer than ever. When the elevator reached the top, Damien turned slightly toward her. His voice was firmer. "Now, I'd like to make things right." Clara gave a faint, almost weary smile. "You can't buy moments back, Mr. Holt. But you can create new ones." And with that, the elevator doors opened. She stepped out first, her figure reflected in the polished floor, fragile yet steady, like a candle in rain light. Damien watched her go, his reflection beside hers, a man realizing for the first time that wealth could fill rooms but not silence. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady, cleansing, relentless. Somewhere in the distance, a child's laughter echoed faintly from the street below, bouncing off the glass walls of the tower. Damien turned his gaze toward it and whispered, almost to himself. Maybe it's time to start over. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the city washed and glimmering, as if forgiveness itself had fallen overnight. Puddles caught sunlight like small fragments of second chances. Yet inside the Orion Tower, forgiveness hadn't reached its highest floor. Damien Holt sat by the window, the skyline reflected over his untouched coffee. His reflection looked unfamiliar, a stranger wearing his success. Once he believed control was strength. Now it just looked like distance. The image of a boy, disappointed, holding back tears over a cancelled cake, wouldn't leave his mind. He had faced angry investors, collapsing markets, public storms. But guilt that came from kindness left undone. That was a quieter, heavier thing. He reached for his phone. "Find out where Clara Evans lives," he told his assistant. Quietly. No attention, no press. It wasn't business. It was restitution. That evening, he drove himself through streets that had never mattered to him before. No chauffeur, no destination, just the hum of tires and a city that looked suddenly human. He parked outside a small cafe and saw her through fogged glass, Clara wiping tables, with tired Grace, and her son, Eli, sketching a cake on a napkin. The drawing was crooked, the candles uneven, but Joy doesn't care for perfection. His throat tightened. He made a call. "Miss Ray," his voice low, hesitant. "There's a bakery downtown. They'll need new ovens. And one special cake, for a boy named Eli Evans. Theme, dream big. No brand, no name attached. Just make it right this time." He ended the call and watched through the glass as Clara laughed at something her son said. The sound crossed the street like sunlight slipping through clouds. He realized how long it had been since he'd heard laughter without cost. Sunday morning, the bakery glowed brighter than usual. A cake waited on the counter, chocolate and vanilla layers brushed with gold dust. On top the words read, "Happy birthday, Eli, dream big." The baker only said, "A gift from someone who still believes kindness matters." No one asked who. The moment was enough. That night, their small apartment filled with laughter and frosting and candlelight. Neighbors gathered. Children sang off-key. Clara smiled until her cheeks hurt, her eyes wet with relief. She whispered, "Thank you, whoever you are," to the quiet. Across the city, Damien stood before his window, the same laughter echoing in his head. He raised a glass of water, whispering to the skyline, to the small things that matter, and the people who remind us they do. For the first time in years, he didn't feel powerful. He felt peaceful. He didn't call the bakery again. Didn't ask for recognition. He simply kept giving. A school donation here, an anonymous envelope there. No headlines. No applause. For Clara, it became a chain of small blessings. For Damien, it became the first time his wealth felt honest. That night, under the same quiet sky, two windows glowed. One above the city, cold and tall, the other warm with laughter and light. Different worlds. Same sky. And between them, a kindness that had finally learned how to find its way home. The city had settled into spring, soft winds brushing through clean streets, golden light, pooling on corners once gray. But somewhere in that comfort, a question kept whispering. Inside Clara, who had cared enough to notice them. Gratitude lingered in her life like sunlight on wet stone. Business at the cafe bloomed. Laughter had found its way back into Eli's voice. And for the first time in years, she woke up, without counting worries. Yet peace never lasts forever. Not when fate still has one more truth to unveil. One quiet afternoon, the postman slipped an envelope through her door. No sender, just her name in careful ink. It felt heavier than paper should. Inside lay an invitation sealed in gold. "You are warmly invited to the annual Orion Foundation Gala, guest of honor, Clara Evans." Her breath caught. For a moment, she thought it was a mistake. But the handwriting there was something familiar in its restraint, as if written by someone learning gentleness for the first time. That Friday, Clara stepped into a world she had only ever glimpsed through television screens. The chandeliers glowed like captured stars. For a woman used to fluorescent cafe lights, it felt like stepping into another world. Every polished floor reflected her hesitation. Every smile from strangers felt distant. At the far end of the hall stood Damien Cross, the billionaire who once hid behind silence and steel. Tonight, he stood without the armor of control. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of unspoken apology. The boardroom had started to feel like an echo chamber. And for once, he longed for real voices, not reports. That longing had built the Orion Foundation, a place meant not for power, but purpose. He had begun funding hospitals, schools, and cafes in forgotten corners of the city, starting with one whose owner taught him what quiet strength looked like. When the lights dimmed, Damien stepped toward the stage. He hadn't planned to speak, but silence demanded otherwise. He faced the crowd, his voice steady yet unguarded. There was a time I thought hype meant success, he began. I thought applause meant respect. I was wrong. True success isn't built on what we take, it's built on what we return. A while ago, I hurt people I never truly saw. One woman in particular showed me that grace doesn't always come wrapped in grand gestures. Sometimes it's a quiet thank you and a child's laughter. The audience hushed. His words didn't feel rehearsed, they felt lived. From her table, Clara watched him. In his gaze, she saw forgiveness he didn't think existed for men like him. And in hers, he found the peace he'd been chasing through every tower he ever built. After the applause, their eyes met one last time. No words, just acknowledgement, the kind that speaks louder than promises. That night, as Clara and Eli walked home, the city lights blinked like gentle witnesses. The air smelled of fresh rain and second chances. Somewhere high above, Damien stood at his window watching the same sky, two souls, finally freed by a single, quiet act of kindness. He raised his glass of water and whispered, "To the small things that matter, and the people who remind us they do." For the first time in years, the man who had everything finally felt enough. But destiny wasn't done weaving their story, not yet.